So employee-generated content is becoming a much bigger part of employer branding and talent acquisition. So how do you make sure that you're using employee-generated content and setting up employee-generated content programs in the right way? Well, you're going to want to listen to this episode that me and Chris had. We had it a couple of weeks ago. I've been on holiday since, so it feels like a while ago. But yeah, it's looking now as I've now it's fresher in the mind, and we had some great conversations about it. So it's definitely worth listening to. Um,
And the
of course,
town,
it's part of a.
the town is
Still,
looking great, by the way, Chris.
no, thank you, mate. Thank you. It's yeah, the Italian half of my family always take the mickey by saying oh, you seem to be whiter than when you left on holiday, but I'm happy with it.
Yeah, that takes his time, my friend.
Yeah, but this episode is basically one of the first of our. We've done a few of these, which is our joint effort between my podcast, Employee Content Marketing, and your podcast, Employer Brand, Employee Content Club, and we did our first event back in May. And the person we're going to speak to was actually they were involved in sponsoring that event, weren't they?
Absolutely. Yeah. We spoke to the brilliant Gary Zurnamer, CEO, founder of Vouch. And yeah, like you said, if it wasn't for Vouch, I don't even know if we would have got our first episode or first Employer Content Club event off the ground. They were
Yeah,
our headline sponsor, helped
yeah,
us make the entire thing happen. But yeah, we had a really, really good conversation with Gary around all things employee generated content, how to do it really well, the pitfalls, everything in between. But a really, really good conversation with a great guy.
no, it is packed full of gems. So let's roll the conversation.
Let's do it.
Hey Gary, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks for joining. It's a bit of a late one for you. Where are you based?
We're in Sydney, so not too bad, but yeah, on the evening side.
No, well, thanks for joining us. I think off the back of the work we did, we had our first Employer Content Club event. So it's great to get Vouch involved in that, and it's great to have Andy and the team there. Good turnout, great conversation, and saw this thing about developing that in-house content creation capabilities. I thought it'd be good to get you chatting. Me and Chris are having a chat after the event and going, let's get Gary on for an episode where we can talk about the impact of employee-generated content and how you can actually get employees engaged in that. Because not everyone likes to be in front of camera, but there are ways of doing it, to make sure it becomes a big part of your approach to content creation. So I'll stop gassing on. Let's start a bit of an intro about yourself then, Gary.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us. And obviously, the event sounds like it was really good success for both sides. So that's a great outcome. I think, yeah, really quick intro. One of the co-founders of the business. We have a co-founder called David, who's our CTO as well, also based in Sydney. Vouch is focused closely aligned around employer brand, employee advocacy, and employer generated content. So we built a kind of end-to-end platform to help create all of these assets that the teams need, obviously through video, which is a really important storytelling medium, but also written and generated content now through sort of the AI advances that have happened in the last 2 years. So how do these kind of small but mighty teams build out the content strategy and build out the advocacy strategy without having to go and, pour tons and tons of budget or really time intensive processes out there as well. So that's the thesis behind the product. We're Aussie, but we're kind of really global from day one. We have a great customer base in the UK, some incredible logos, Dynamo Marston's, Flutter, a number of others that we started working with in the region. In the US, we have a really great customer list that we built over the last couple of years. But yeah, ultimately, engineering and technology is built out of Australia, but scaled globally. So we think that there's a really interesting kind of dynamic at play at the moment where there's a massive need for all this content, and then there's kind of employee advocacy and using the team to build the next sort of talent funnel in these businesses. And then also, what are the role of recruiters look like in 2025 and beyond? Are they also content creators? Do they need to be getting out there and sort of attracting the next generation of talent in a unique way? So kind of the modules that we build think about the future of work as well.
We know that there's a need, there's a demand for content, in terms of the audience, especially video. But look, kind of when you talk to companies that are kind of a bit on the fence about things, going, well, I'm not sure, we've been thinking about video, but it's a bit difficult to convince the budget holders to do it. What is the kind of the business case for video and kind of the regular cadence of content?
I think the company, first of all, has kind of a few criteria. They need to be hiring at some sort of scale. They need to have a a pipeline of talent they need to bring in and attract. They need to have their own business, but an employee value proposition already set, or at least an idea of what that looks like what story are they telling? And then I think oftentimes the need is leadership saying, hey, like we have a massive push to get new grads in the door, or we want to really find a specific type of role in this region. And the storytelling around that becomes important. Like how do you, in a competitive market, particularly some of the industries you work in, like finance and healthcare and pharma, how do you sort of tell the story neatly and through the lens of real people as opposed to kind of other methods? So I think there's a recipe that happens, and then a company sort of says, right, we're really ready to dive in, and then they activate the employee base from there.
I was just going to say, Gary, I love that you guys are also spending an awful lot of time on that advocacy piece, because I think with so many solutions you see in the market now, there's such a laser focus on talent attraction, employer branding, that the advocacy piece often gets kind of forgotten about and diluted. But I think with advocacy, it's such an important part of EVP, employer branding and attraction anyway. Like by virtue of what you're doing here, it kind of fuels everything else also. But I really like that. I see with a lot of your communication as a business and as a brand, you seem to have a really nice balance of attraction, employer brand and advocacy. I take it there's a lot of thought that's gone into that balance.
Yeah, I think like ultimately it's the downstream impacts of having a great content strategy. You've got to distribute it. You've got to get it out the door as well. What we don't want is these vast libraries of content just sitting with, EB teams, and then how do they kind of get that into the organization to activate it and get it out there? So we focus on it because distribution is important. A lot of us are marketers. It's like the content's one pillar, but then distributing it is also as critical as that first pillar. So it's kind of two jobs you have to do as a product. And the expectations are high. Like there's companies want to say, well, show me the metrics around how much engagement there was in this content, or how did it actually return investment for us? And so advocacy is a natural extension of that. But yeah, it's pretty intentional for us. Obviously, we're kind of continuing to build out that product. It's a balance between like putting the burden on the employees to do a lot of work and actually making it super easy for them to actually just hit post or get their own voice out there. So kind of always tinkering with the product to get that right. But yeah, no, I think it's something we think about for sure alongside the content creation.
So if you were going to sum up Vouch, what would you say to people?
Yeah, the elevator picture, because you've almost got to, if people don't understand the world of employer brand or recruitment marketing, you kind of got to start there. We tend to sort of say, Vouch is a product that connects employer brand, recruitment teams, hiring managers, regular employees into one platform where they can create and share content that helps attract candidates into the organization. I think video is a big component of that. Like video is hard. It's really hard to get right, hard to create, hard to edit, hard to manage. We focus on that. And I think it's a critical medium. And that's something that I believe in my career forever in all my previous roles. I think also today it's about like, what can you create out of that library as well? Can you create written content? Can you help sort of start to actually define people's EVP in a way? Can you actually make career sites and job postings more interesting and dynamic and off brand? That's kind of a downstream impact of getting the video right. But yeah, my summary to people is that's an employer brand and recruitment tool and a talent platform to basically help people fill the funnel and bring better people in the door.
And with the change in market, Gary, certainly in the last 5 years that you guys have been on, making huge strides globally, have you found that you've kind of pivoted or micro pivoted a couple of times in that kind of 5-year journey? Or has it been a relatively intentional kind of roadmap journey?
No, I think any founder or that says it's like a super intentional straight line is probably not being that truthful. I think ultimately there are so many pivot points, and whether that's a go-to-market strategy or a region that you want to push into or a product that you thought would land really well but hasn't, so you have to adjust around that really quickly. There are so many pivot points. I think you have to have a unique advantage as a founder. Like, what is the reason you started this business, and what is your unique advantage to be able to bring something to market? So I think there's always been this content creation angle for us, short form video, authentic storytelling. That's always been a pillar of Vouch. And then you kind of just keep tweaking the engine and the model to make sure it's the right fit and it's the best buyer is available to go and sell that product to. I mean, even now we're still thinking about we've talked about video a lot, but it's not the only medium people want. Like, it's one component of an employer brand strategy. So we're sort of saying, well, hey, can we be purely video first forever, or what's the next chapter for us? Like a small teaser, we're releasing a product ideally this week in the next couple of days, which extends on that. We think there's a really interesting opportunity for recruiters, employer brand folks, hiring managers, even internal comms to start working more closely together out of one platform. And that's something that we're thinking about as the next play as well. So lots of changes.
Nice. Awesome. I think the three of us are probably equally as passionate about content, employee generated content. And I suppose quite often video, I know there's obviously other mediums, you just touched on that, Gary, but video often being at the beating heart of talent attraction, employer brand advocacy, all that kind of stuff. One of the key challenges is, of course, getting that content created, encouraging employees to come on a journey of content creation. How do you try and tackle that as a business at Vouch and work with your partners through that kind of sometimes hurdle, sometimes I suppose different use
Yeah.
cases, but it can often be a hurdle.
For sure. I think there's two ways, right? One is software. Like, how do you make the actual software as easy, intuitive, fun, dynamic as possible for both the user on our side, the admin user, but also the person recording? And I think in this industry, we encountered a lot of software that had a lot of friction for the recording experience for people. There were app downloads or logins, or there were screens or things you had to move through. Like, any bit of friction you introduce into video, we found was like a real non-starter for the person recording. So the software part, we worked really hard on user experience, kind of like thoughtful design, making it fun, engaging process. And then I think there's also our customer success or our accounts team, which actually has a ton of expertise around, we roll out playbooks around like, hey, where are you on your video journey? Is everyone super engaged? If so, like, here's how you hit go and just really build that library. Or are you expecting a ton of friction when you launch out? And if so, here's some messaging, some language, some frameworks, some decks, some things that you can disseminate internally to get the message across to everyone that this is important, it's easy, and we invested in a product to do it. So I think it's a combination of kind of that human expertise that we can offer around, like, we've seen a lot of these challenges, and also the software being as easy to use as possible. I will say that, like, in any organizations, sometimes there's friction. People don't love recording. It adds an element of uncertainty to leadership if they haven't done it before. But I think they start to see the payoff really quickly once the content comes back in. There's kind of a moment of like, oh, wow, that's super interesting. And I can see my team on camera, and it sort of flips the switch for them a little bit.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I think just this thing about, so your playbooks, I love the fact you do these playbooks, these resources that companies can dip into. What kind of things do those playbooks include, or what kind of key pieces of kind of advice and tactics do your clients use to make sure they are getting employees involved? Because the technology needs to be absolutely right. The friction, you're absolutely right about it being frictionless. What are the things that are used as successful tactics that make sure that employees are contributing without feeling that they're forced, twisted their arm to actually create this content?
Well, I think there's a few components, like leadership, communication about it seems to be really important. Like, hey team, we are investing in products and this is an initiative we're running and here's the reason why. I think just like that general communication around, we're not asking you to create a video that's like going to sit dormant on a LinkedIn page. These assets are being used to fill roles. They're going into specific job listings and career sites. So I think the why communication from leadership is one thing that we really emphasize. And we often write that message for leaders, and it's kind of a lot of through work to do there. I think it's then about, like, what is the upside for the individual recording? You're going to be able to communicate what you want out of your next teammate, or you're going to be able to help land the next hire to make your business unit stronger. So there's a strong reason to do it. And then I think it's sort of about starting quite small with a group of internal influencers or advocates that, generally they're good on camera. They like being on camera. You can start to see the early wins in an organization, and people do start to pick up and say, hey, Chris and Chris are great at recording. They made some great videos. I wonder if I can sort of get that going for my team and sort of build content for my recruitment team. So I think it's a combination of communication at leadership level, explaining the why, and like articulating it's not just a random video request, finding those kind of key early influences and wins to spread the content across the organization and show the impact of it. Those are kind of the pillars that we think about.
Do you find that, see, with the rise of personal brand, I'm sure if you go out onto Google and search and see the trends around how many searches there be for personal branding, it has increased, but with the rise of a personal brand, do you see that there's also that connection with individuals seeing it's beneficial for their own personal brand to be involved in this kind of content?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you're working for a larger organization, you can build a profile for yourself beyond your day-to-day work life. I think that's impactful. People also are building personal brand because of uncertain markets, or they're not sure what's going to happen from a role perspective. I think having visibility around what you do and explaining your work and your career is only net positive. I don't know if it's the only driver for people to record, but I'd say it's a factor for sure, particularly if the content's good and there's a good setup and structure around it and it highlights what people are doing day to day. I think that's a net positive for the individual as well.
I often see that it helps because whether it's employee generated or other production approaches, is great to be able to raise the profile of the individual within the team, but also the team within the department within the business, and then the business within the industry. I think it's that frustration that people get where it's like, do people really know what our department does?
Yeah.
Or we're the best kept
Totally.
secret in the industry. It's really great when you see employees do it for those reasons as well.
I mean, we have a customer, Clorox, out of the US, and they create remote video content with scientists in the lab that are creating the products for Clorox. Like, it's a super interesting use case for us. These scientists are creating some of the most well-known products that a lot of us use every day, but they don't get any visibility. They don't get to talk about the craft. They don't talk about the science behind it. So they create these videos, and it's really passionate, like bleach product scientists come through, or whatever the product is. And it's really interesting narrative. And so I think, like, it's a great point, Chris, that it's a great chance to highlight yourself in the organization or your team and the work you're doing. So once the first couple do it, then it's like, oh, great. Well, we'd love to do that for our team. And how do we get some of that content going? You just need that momentum to build, I think, from the beginning. And that's where a really good kind of customer success program can help our customers, we think.
I think another really nice thing about it is, and it's a bit of a cliche term, I do know that, but humanizing the process, as in just being able to watch and listen and understand to very normal people that have got lives just like us and probably have hobbies and interests just like us, doing these really interesting things in a really short period of time. You're able to really get under the bonnet of a lot of that stuff and consume that and understand it. And I think it breaks down a lot of anxiety for people as well. There are certain people looking at corporate career sites, corporate websites, and trying to figure out if they have a place in that organization or that team or that role. And I think another part, just going back to your scientist, the case study example there, humanizing that process and just letting people know it's just normal, nice people doing this, just like me and you. And, you should maybe give it a go yourself type thing. It's the thing I think I love most about this whole process and what you make it so easy to do.
I agree fully. I think also it's interesting, like the more intimidating traditional the organization, the more that this can be interesting, in my opinion. If you're a grad that's been drinking and partying at university and then you're entering the workforce and you're looking at these, whether it's consulting or banking or finance, and you want to go into those worlds and you're looking at those career sites, I imagine there's a huge disconnect between who you are and what you want to be at work and what you think that workforce looks like. But I think it's very easy to spin up a ton of great employee generated content from other grads or senior leaders saying, like, look, it's a big old banking institution, but we're real people, normal people. This is what we do. We have fun. And I think that's a really important point, is that you can reduce some of the anxiety, friction about people entering those organizations from day one. So it's a positive experience if you get some storytelling.
Yeah, agreed.
And imagine over the last 2 years, there's been a whole lot of development. Your team's probably been absolutely at it in terms of, taking on what is, the massive developments in AI. How has that kind of impacted in your platform, and kind of how is that making people's lives easier?
Yeah, I mean, our co-founder David and our CTO sort of flagged really early on that, like, this is interesting. Starting to think about what does application look like for us as at that time, very video heavy product, and then how do we build out more content for people based upon what was happening. I think you have to remember as well, even 18 months ago, 2 years ago, the AI outputs were not great. Like, I don't know if you remember, but I was trying to write even emails, trying to get AI to help me write an email. It was hard work. It was like multiple revolutions of prompts. And so I think what's interesting is, like, even weekly, it accelerates at the moment. And so you have to be kind of testing different models and then plugged into different solutions. And I think people's expectations are rising rapidly. So how do you keep up with that? Almost kind of like if someone's in GPT 20 times a day and they're in Vouch, how do you make sure that you're comparable? So for us, the biggest things are, if you have large volumes of video in your library, scanning through hundreds or thousands of hours of video is not something you should have to do anymore as a human editor. You should be able to search Vouch, ask us to find you the key highlight quotes and reels based upon what your EVP is, or based upon what your prompts are. In Vouch, we have like lightning fast transcriptions. We have the ability to summarize a large amount of information. So we have a couple of customers that actually go out and, yes, they collect content, but not all of it's public. A lot of it's for EVP generation, or starting to uncover, like, what are the most interesting parts of the business that they want to do storytelling around. So, there's some summarization and organization and sort of theme grouping that we can bring into the product as well. And then of course, like content generation for us is critical. So we want EB folks to be able to write hundreds of blogs in Vouch every quarter if they need to. We want to be able to spin off a bunch of written copy from the videos that they create. We want to help them actually bring their recruiters into the product and say, hey, here's all the personas, here's the candidates that you're hiring for, here is some sort of perfectly aligned copy with that persona, along with great video content that you might want to share in recruiting outreach. So you kind of, for us, it's almost like organization and tagging and editing. It's summarization and sort of pillars of basically bringing themes to life for people, which is really important. And then there's also content generation that we can help with on the AI side. So it goes all the way through, but we take a balance of being thoughtful about how you design it without jamming it in and making it good and fast as well.
Yeah. And I suppose like ideation is one of the most difficult and time consuming things of content creation, because it's like, okay, I often feel like this personally. I know I need to create some content. Okay, what could I do? Okay, then you've got your topics, and then there needs to be a cascading kind of list of bullet points below each topic. But, you know, are you guys starting to weave in some of that ideation stuff using AI, as in, you know, making it, I suppose, a bit easier for employees to, or maybe they're encouraged on, it could be on this topic, or if you wanted it to be about onboarding or a recent promotion, yeah, maybe these are some things that you could be talking about. But is ideation a part of the AI strategy as well?
100%, and more every day. So there's two parts to that, which is super exciting for us. One is obviously the person recording the content. It's like you sit there with a blank screen. So we have the ability to do script generation or ideation at the point of recording, and we can give people guidance and prompts around that. That's one persona in the product, the person recording. But the other I think is really interesting is employee brand teams have to have a content calendar for 365 days a year that's interesting, engaging, built around pillars, themes, EVP. So what we're really working on at the moment, which is something that we're excited about, is the ability to actually pick up different signals from a company, whether it's Glassdoor, that could be good or bad, career sites, LinkedIn live pages, existing EVPs, anything you can feed Vouch. We can actually start to say, hey, out of all of this information, here's the content areas and ideas that we think would be interesting for you. And then we can sort of build out a content calendar almost automatically based upon that. For us, that's a really exciting direction for an EB team in particular, to be able to say like, hey, here's everything that you need to know about me and my business. Tell me what you think is interesting and what we should be creating. So I think that ideation piece is a really good shout, Chris. It's something we're very focused on at the moment.
Yeah, I like it. And I think that's where the marriage of AI and authentic content like works really well together. Leveraging AI for great stuff, but just getting everything to the door. So when you actually want to create the authentic content, a lot of the heavy lifting's been done, but then you can just run at 100 miles an hour on your content. So I think all of us see a lot of these tools where it's like, we've got a platform that can create all of your content at scale without you having to lift a finger. And it's like, I don't think any of us are fans of that. So yeah, I like what you're doing there. That's really nice.
No, we were at Recfest, weren't we, recently, Chris? And actually AI was a big talking point. And I think one of the things I took from that is that, well, reaffirm what I thought, which is this thing about employer branding teams, or TA teams that need to do employer branding. We either don't have a full-time person doing it, or it's one person doing it, or it's a small team doing it. That's typically most people, at employer branding conferences, events, are one of those type of people. So to have this kind of little agency surrounding you, which is, your AI agents to support you, is, I think, fantastic. And I like the fact that you can draw upon insights from the content that already exists on Scene It, because then there's that thing about asking the right questions to then have content that is in line with the strategy that you're putting together.
100%.
It's like with anything, good briefing results in, ask the right questions, get the right answers, exactly. And it's been like that with briefing creative teams over the years. That is the case now with, there is a place for AI to be able to not just say, can you do this for me, but going, I've got this, this, and this, and this. I need to do this and this. What do you think?
Yeah.
And actually lots of good ideas stand on the shoulders of bad ideas. I really like that thing about AI kind of helping multiply the efforts of solo or small team.
For us, it's like, well, how far do you take the automation, in this day and age, like these kind of agents? We're super interested in it and we look at it a lot, but ultimately I don't know if teams, especially organizations of sort of scale that we work with, like they're almost sort of figuring out their own, like, how do we adopt this internally with guardrails? And, I don't know if they're fully there yet in terms of like letting some sort of agentic workflow run from start to finish today. But listen, it's not to say it's not going to be the case in a year or two.
Those shades of those can be in the using of ChatGPT or Claude or your platform, where actually you don't necessarily have an agent, but you are working with it in the right way to get the right answers back, the right kind of content back, or the right ideas back.
Sure. And I think that's one of the dangerous things, isn't it, about the AI landscape that we're in, because the capabilities of what we have in front of us are kind of going into space, into the moon, but it's like the maturity of the market and the maturity of the users that are using the technologies, all of us included. There's a huge disparity between what's possible and what the market's actually ready for. And I think that's another thing that I don't think enough firms are taking into consideration. I think you need to be really delicate with that blend, don't you?
Yeah, people are nervous about what does AI mean in Vouch? How do you implement it? What does it mean for security teams? We have to sort of work through all of that.
So we're talking about organizations, creating employee generated content. From what you've seen, what has been the impact on companies when they have done it right? There must be times when you look at what a client's done and you've got a big smile on your face going, that's exactly why I set up the business.
Yeah.
So kind of what have you seen when companies are doing it right?
I think metrics wise, they're seeing like a uptick in candidate interest in the business. They see more applications. They see, ideally, they're condensing time to hire in some way. They're basically saying, hey, like by implementing this content across, even if it's a LinkedIn job ad or somewhere on Indeed or Seek, or they're putting it on the career site, there's some condensation of time to hire and bringing the right people in and finding better people. I think they start to feel like they have a voice. Maybe they didn't have I don't want to say soulless, but there wasn't it was a corporate entity, but maybe there's something visual and there's a voice. I love to see these like older, more interesting businesses in different industries, basically that aren't tech, start to be able to understand they can create content. They can be their own kind of little marketing engine. They can start to bring a voice to the organization that wasn't there before. I'd love to see that. I think storytelling, like some of the storytelling around individuals, like these companies are big and they're successful and financially successful, but they're made up of people that are contributing to that. And I think when you see someone's story highlighted, if it's in a remote area or a different part of the organization that maybe doesn't get the visibility that it usually does, that makes me very happy and sort of interested in the journey of that organization, because I mean, without those people, they're nowhere. So I think those things are really important. And then interesting to see like leaders get really excited about it. You often see feedback from customers where, hey, my C-suite loved this. They thought it was an incredible initiative. And then all of a sudden employer brand is on the radar. They're small teams, or there might even be one individual, but they're starting to make themselves known internally as well. And leadership is loving the content they're putting out. So that's super exciting for us. It's a big validation of the platform and the approach as well.
I was just going to say, Gary, it must be nice as well being such a fundamental part of like these big shifts in culture, because introducing technology like yours, when it's adopted at scale and your things are starting to work really well, it's a fundamental shift in that organization's culture, isn't it? Certainly the way that they attract talent and communicate internally, via advocacy and that type of thing. But that must be a really nice thing to know that you're going on this really significant journey with these companies.
It's scary as well, because ultimately the product has to stand up to that test a lot of the time. So the first use case might be like, hey, my CEO wants to record an update that we're really excited about us buying Vouch. It's like, okay, well, let's prep around that and make sure that they've got what they need and that things are in shape in terms of brand elements and design and templates for them and scripting. The exciting opportunities when a company maybe has said, look, we really want to go all in here. There's leadership buy-in. We want to change things internally in terms of process and workflows and how open we are and authentic we are as a business. When that happens and they buy a product to support that, that's exciting for us because it means we're part of change. I think as we would struggle sometimes if an organization is kind of like, yeah, we're keen to try it for 12 months and there's not really much buy-in and they don't really want to make the shift. And then it's kind of like software can't solve those issues all the time. It's got to come from internal sometimes too. Yeah, I agree, Chris. I mean, it's exciting for us to be on these journeys.
Can imagine. I can imagine it being really cathartic for employees that are big advocates for this and that actually go on a journey and they're creating a lot of content. I'd love to see some research in the months and years ahead of those people that almost diarise their journey with the company, through the form of media, but jumping on these campaigns where they're able to not just sit at their desk and do their work, but they're all almost kind of, it must be quite therapeutic and cathartic in a way, and really good for just general well-being in the way of I'm sure the research probably isn't quite there yet, because we're still on a relatively early journey, in regards to seeing 5 to 10 year like research papers. But I think that's going to be an interesting thing as well, because I'm really confident that it's making a big impact in that area.
I think, there's been a lot more talk about corporate influencers, and actually got people who they've grown up with social media. They are used to putting a camera or having a camera put in front of them. They're used to journaling. They're used to reflecting. So actually I think you're absolutely right. I can only see it increasing more where, it's, why wouldn't you share some things, and document it, especially with, I see obviously the whole personal branding piece becoming becoming even more relevant. And then especially when organizations see that there are benefits for their employees to raise their own personal brand.
Yeah.
Because it helps them not only attract talent, but also, God forbid, maybe their investors see the content their employees are creating. Maybe their customers or clients or future customers or clients see the content their employees are creating. But I'm always naturally very optimistic and excited about what's going to come in the very near future. But it's about going, well, this world of employer branding actually is a big money maker. It's when you do it in the right way. Maybe we have to do a piece of research, Chris, and we'll whack it on the to-do list. Let's see if we can do something. But looking at that over the next few years and seeing the role of content creators within organizations and the impact on businesses, I think is really interesting.
Even marketing lists, like the employee generated content can drive revenue. Like, some of the top marketing trends of 2025 is employee generated content. I think that's interesting. It's not just about talent. It's about, can you build these internal influences to actually drive customers in as well?
So bringing it back to someone who's listening, they maybe are not doing employee generated content and they're thinking about, I need to get started, or they're doing it. And maybe you've got, I think about a typical scenario where maybe they've given access to the TikTok account or got a video and someone's gone, this is my day in the office.
Yep.
I'm commuting in. Here's my mocha choca, latte, and here's, I'm having breakfast. And it would be kind of your like 2 or 3 takeaways for organizations wanting to kind of implement or level up their employee content generation.
Yeah, I think the first one, to Chris's point earlier, is ideations. What are the pillars that make your business unique? There's usually some 5, 6 different content themes and pillars that make sense, whether it's authenticity or high performance or whatever you want your business to say externally. I think that's the first starting point. It's really important. Identifying those tools can help others to get you those content themes. And then I think it's probably about, well, what are the hiring initiatives that marry up to those themes? So if we need to bring in, a lot more software engineers or grads or, finance folks, like what are the key hiring initiatives that marry up to those themes? I think that's when it gets really weighty, is when you're sort of like, all right, well, these are our key personas and things we need to hire for. These are the themes. And the third thing is activating. So it's like, all right, so the quickest way to do this is to go out and find, advocates, around those themes. So can we go into the organization and start to get people that, enroll for this initiative, and they want to be sort of building their personal brand, or they want to be part of the story, and then just getting them to sort of start telling that story. Doesn't have to be Vouch. It can be recording a Teams call as a starting point, or it can be just getting them to record something and send it to you. And I think starting small and scaling, I'm not advocating for a product in day one if you're not there yet. Like, the identification of the content pillars, finding your internal advocates and influencers, scrappily getting it done to prove the value, and then scaling from there. That would be my sort of 3-step process.
Yeah, lovely. I just particularly like that bit you were saying about creating that business case, because actually, you get to a situation where someone's going, I'm loving this content. How long does it take? It takes this amount of time.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So could we do it another way? I do like the fact you've got a free trial on your website, which is great. It's just really nice, because someone then can just jump into it and try it out and do what you said. Take a particular focus, get a few people on board, and then try something out, because straight away that's trying it before you're buying it. Classic thing.
And it is a very cool tool. We've had the benefit of a couple like whistle-stop tours of the platform, and particularly some of your kind of AI-focused feature base that you've introduced in the last 12 plus months. But yeah, you're doing some really neat stuff, and I think you're certainly ahead of the curve when it comes to the lane that you're in. So yeah, kudos.
Oh, thank you. That's great.
I think it's really important for us to make sure that, and this is one of the reasons wanting to get you involved, is me and Chris like curious individuals, and we like to find out what's going on in the industry so that others don't have to do the heavy lifting. So to be able to, talk to yourself and get a real insight into the platform, but also give some valuable advice, I think is great, because people can then make their own choice, and we're happy to give people a platform to make people's lives easier. It's small teams or solo teams or 10% of your job title. It's all about developing that in-house content creation capability. The more that happens, I think the better, because I think then when companies work with partners, the work is better, but also there's certain things you can't outsource.
Yeah.
And I think stuff like this is good, just definitely to start in-house first of all.
Sure.
Thanks, Gary. It's been a good chat. Appreciate it. Appreciate you staying up a bit later for us to chat about this. But
It's
it's been good chat.
unsociable. It's actually quite it's an unsociable. We're really grateful.
No,
Yeah, everyone's a
fun
snap.
life,
Thank
30
you.
years, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, good to see you.
Cheers, guys.